And other than that, I'm very excited to hear about the Ottauquechee River Basin Plan. So I'll go ahead and introduce Marie. So this workshop is led by Marie Levesque Caduto, who is a watershed planner for the Department of Environmental Conservation's Water Investment Division. Marie works on rivers, lakes, and streams from Killington to Vernon to improve and protect water quality and aquatic habitat conditions by working with local partners to identify and implement on-the-ground restoration projects. So I think that's all from me. Marie, you can go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Ginevra. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining tonight. I appreciate the invitation to be able to talk with you this evening as I'm just starting to launch the tactical basin planning process for the local rivers here, the Ottauquechee and the Black. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, which will hopefully come through. And I can't see anybody's faces for some reason. Great. So I just want to make sure you can see what is coming. So I'll just give you a quick kind of overview of what this is all about and then launch into the local specifics. So as Ginevra said, I'm called a watershed planner, and my job is to write plans, which are basically a guide for the Agency of Natural Resources on how we are going to manage the waters, the surface waters, lakes, rivers, ponds, wetlands, over the next 5 years, and what we need to be doing to protect and restore them. So this particular basin plan is the Ottauquechee and the Black, and all these other little brooks that flow directly into the Connecticut River, as well as a portion of the Connecticut River. So hopefully this is going smoothly. There we go. So we do this all over the state, and there are 17 different basins, but the one we're talking about today is the tan and the blue there, which just happens to be called Basin 10. So you'll hear me refer to Basin 10 a number of times tonight. And this is what Basin 10 is. It's the Ottauquechee River, which runs from Killington down to Heartland, where it hits the Connecticut. And then off the other side of Killington in Shrewsbury and Plymouth, the Black River runs down through Ludlow, Cavendish, Wethersfield, Springfield, and hits the Connecticut at Hoyt's Landing, if you know where that is, the boat launch on the Connecticut River in Springfield. And these other smaller areas are what drain directly to the Connecticut River, the biggest one being Millbrook, which is kind of West Windsor and Windsor, Lulls Brook in Heartland, and a few others. So as this says, the Ottauquechee covers 223 square miles and the Black covers 202. And we're talking about 38 miles of the Connecticut River main stem itself, basically from White River Junction down to Herrick's Cove in Rockingham, which is the mouth of the Williams River. We write these basin plans every 5 years kind of to answer a number of different questions. Basically, what is the water quality condition and the condition of the aquatic habitat now? What needs to be done to improve those conditions if they're not what we hope them to be, whether it's the water quality or the habitat? How do we go about doing that? What are the strategies we need to implement to solve the problems that are out there? And who do we work with? Who are the partners that are willing and able to work with us on implementing these projects? And where do we find the funding to do that? And finally, what are our goals for water and water quality? What do we want them to be? And what do we want to use them for? So we call those management goals, and those are kind of the aspirational of where we want to head with our water quality. And as I said, this is a 5-year process. So it's been going on. I think this is the 3rd or 4th time I come back to Basin 10 in the years I've been doing this. It starts out with water quality monitoring. So teams of scientists are going out to the rivers and streams, a team to the lakes and ponds, and a team goes out to wetlands and do those water quality monitoring testing and assessments and looking at all the conditions that are out there. Following that, we take a year to take all that raw data and turn it into something comprehensible. So we turn that into lots of maps and narrative and charts that tell us what's going on now with our water quality. And then I come to the plate and start developing a draft plan. And that's what I'm doing now. So we're kind of in year 3 of the cycle. And I'm reaching out to you folks to hear what you would like to see in a tactical basin plan, what waters you would like to see protected, where we need to do restoration. And I'm going to take all that information and put a draft plan together. And then hopefully by next summer sometime, I'll come back with a drafted plan for everybody to take a look at and review and give feedback on. And then once that's all done and finalized, we'll spend the next 5 years implementing that, making those projects happen, seeing what we can do to improve the conditions that we found. And all through that process, and particularly as I come back to a basin, we take some time and evaluate how we did. Did we get these projects done? What's happened in the interim? So we do that all along the way. When I talk about water quality monitoring, we do 3 different types of monitoring. We look at the physical condition of the watersheds. You know, what are the stream banks like? Is there erosion? Is there vegetation on the streams? What's the interplay between the land and the water? The geomorphic, as we call it, conditions. We also do all the chemical testing, which is pH and chemistry and chlorides from road salts and nutrients for phosphorus and nitrogen and all those kind of parameters. And we focus a lot on the biological monitoring, which are bugs and fish, the bugs that live in the rivers and streams and lakes, and the fish that are in them, because they tell us an enormous amount about the conditions, both the water quality conditions and the habitat conditions. So we look at those, and again, we do those for all the different areas of surface waters. This is the kind of data that we end up looking at from the assessments, and the assessment reports should be hitting my desk in a month, but this is preliminary. So we look at these communities, the bug community and the fish community, whether it's in excellent condition or whether it's in poor condition. And the darker the green the bug, the better, and the darker the red, the more concern we have. So we look at these and we update it and try to figure out, so where do we need to focus our restoration work? And where do we need to focus our protection work? Where's the good stuff that we want to make sure stays good? So these assessments help us identify what the sources of the pollutants are and what's causing those pollutants to get into the water. So we look at all those, and that helps us identify those high quality waters for protection and the waters that aren't meeting our goals, which end up being called impaired. So this is what our last Skittle chart looked like. We call these our Skittle charts because of all the little funny colored dots. And the multicolored ones are the lakes that are being assessed. And I'll go into this a little in more detail. But I do want you to know that all of this data is accessible to the public on the agency's website. So if you go to and you pull up the ANR Natural Resources Atlas and you click all the right little tabs, you will get maps that show you where we've done all our water quality work. And this is the symbol that shows you what we have monitored. So in this case, we've monitored for bugs and fish and chemistry and habitat. Some of them, we don't do that. Some streams are too small to monitor for fish. But where we have the data, you can pull this up and see what the condition of your local stream or pond is. And this is what it tells you. It'll show you all the chemical parameters that we've monitored. It'll show you over the years how the condition of the bug community has changed or not. Same thing with the fish community and what that habitat looks like. So, you know, these are all the things that we're studying and taking into account when I put these plans together. We use all this information for both the good end of the spectrum and the not so good end of the spectrum. And the good end is the water quality classifications. And we're in the process of doing quite a lot with water classification because we have new ones that we can work with. We used to have just A1 and B and now we have A1, B1, and B2. A2 waters, I'm going to keep separate because those are drinking water supplies, basically drinking water reservoirs that municipalities have, and those aren't our natural waters. So I'm not going to get into detail about those. But for the others, we classify our surface waters by the uses we make of them. And so a water could be an A1 water for aquatic habitat, but B2 water for boating. You know, it just depends on what we use that. If there's 4 dams on the river, it's going to be the best boating reach. So those are the kind of things that are taken into account. But most of this is based on data that we're gathering in the field studies. So each of these classifications has specific water quality criteria to go with it that makes it meet that particular class. And that's a good thing because it gives us the opportunity to protect those where we have excellent water quality, where it meets those A1 conditions. We want to make sure our waters stay there and don't get degraded over time. So we take those, and we have a law that's called the Anti-Degradation Law. So you can't degrade a water beyond its classification. So say a large development, we're going in to a B1 water, and there were going to be some discharges, permitted discharges from that development. That development and that work has to be done to a level that will protect the water quality and keep it at a B1 classification. So what that means is, as we have that use, the particular use that we are protecting with that classification, over time, those discharges could accumulate to degrade that water quality. It could not be degraded beyond this B2, B1 level if it started as an A1. And the same for a B1 to a B2. What we don't want to see is a water be degraded beyond the B2 criteria, because that pushes it into an impaired water. And that's where we have to take action and restore the water quality there, which is, as I assume you realize, would be a really expensive proposition. So the waters that we have classified, the purple on the map are class A1 waters. Those are our most pristine, most natural waters. And anything above 2,500 feet in elevation is automatically an A1. That's through statute. And the A2 waters are the green ones. Those are drinking water supplies. And there are some that are actually both. So like down here in Ludlow. So that's what we've got, and everything else in this entire area is considered B2 until we go through a process with those water quality criteria and the public to increase those classifications to B1 or B2. And that's part of what I'll be recommending in the plan. Another opportunity for protection is to use something called the Outstanding Resource Waters designation, which there's 14 different reasons you can classify a water as an outstanding resource water. And it can be everything from great water quality. It can also be a beautiful waterfall or a great archaeological site. This is a national classification. There's state ORW and there's federal ORW. And these are waters that are being considered for ORW reclassification because we've got some great falls in these watersheds. Buttermilk Falls is out by Okemo, up north of there. Cavendish Gorge is on the Black River in Cavendish, and Comtu Falls is right in the center of Springfield. and they're really neat. And the north branch of the Ottauquechee River is well promoted for its amazing fishery. So these are things that we need public participation to make these processes go forward. So if there's any interest in that, I'm glad to work with any organization to help move these forward. Oh, where'd that go? We also do the same. We have classifications for wetlands. There's class 1 and class 2 wetlands. And right now we don't have any class 1 wetlands in this region. So these are ones that are being proposed for study to see if they meet the class 1 wetland criteria. Another pretty stringent set of criteria is needed for that. And these are all potentials because they offer functions and values of wetlands that are pretty significant. The one that I am really happy about is Eskobog, which is actually in process of being reclassified. The Heartland Conservation Commission took this on and is working with the state and the public to make that happen, which I think is great. It'll be the first class 1 wetland in the region, which would be cool. And then there's the other end of the spectrum. We do have impaired waters, those waters that aren't meeting the B2 criteria. Excuse me. And when they don't meet that, it means they are not meeting the Vermont water quality standards. And in that case, the Agency of Natural Resources is compelled by EPA to work on those waters to improve the conditions and to regain that level of water quality needed to meet B2. As B2, even though it sounds like it's a lower class, B2 waters are still in really good condition. They're fishable, they're swimmable, they're boatable. There are generally most, as I said, most of our waters. And when waters aren't meeting B2, we really do need to do something to improve those conditions. And right now there are 7 waters in this basin that are on the impaired waters list. So Neil Brook is basically, it's the downstream of the closed Hartford landfill, so that stream is impacted by the old landfill. Commissary Brook is way down in the corner of Rockingham, and that is got lots of metals in it. We also impair waters. They're called altered when they have invasive species in them. Mill Pond or Kennedy's Pond in Windsor has lots of Eurasian milfoil in it, so that is an altered brook, as is Hoyt's Landing. Unfortunately, a lot of boat landings end up with invasive species issues because boats are coming in and out and they're going from an infested water to a water that doesn't have it, and they leave remnants of plants that start new populations. So boat launches up and down the Connecticut and on a number of lakes are locations where invasive species tend to end up. So Hoyt's Landing is one of those locations. The Connecticut River is also all over the Connecticut River, pretty much the whole 38 miles are altered for flow, and that's kind of inevitable. There are large hydroelectric dams in Wilder and in Bellows Falls, Walpole. So those back up water for many, many miles above those dams. So flow is not natural along the Connecticut River. So the same thing here on these two. Lulls Brook, which is in Heartland, is stressed. So it's not officially impaired. It hasn't crossed the line between B2 and impaired, but it's close to that line. And we really don't want it to go below where it becomes an impaired water. And we have to deal with all the regulations that kick in once a water is classified as impaired. So we want to address these before they reach that. So they get a lot of attention so that we can make sure they don't become an impaired water. And Lulls Brook is the concern is sediment. There's a lot of sediment getting into the brook. And sediment is a pollutant, even though it sounds like it's just natural soil. Excess sediment locks up all the spaces between rocks. It carries nutrients with it. It smothers fish eggs. It changes the aquatic habitat. So sediment is considered a pollutant. So we need to be working on that. Same thing with Millbrook. Find that one. It's got sediment issues. It's also got, there's a lot of development in some areas along Millbrook. So stormwater runoff is an impact there as well. And then in the upper watershed, Tropical Storm Irene really hit hard in the upper Millbrook watershed. So there's a lot of erosion and stream bank failures that are going on there. So these are all waters that in the basin plan are going to be focal areas for implementation and restoration projects. So what do we do about it? That's, you know, this is what I do. Try to find what we do about it and make that happen. So this is a picture of an old bridge abutment on the Ottauquechee River that during Tropical Storm Irene funneled the water. There was so much water, it constricted the flow and kind of basically blew out the riverbanks below it and flooded the riverbanks above it because the water just couldn't pass. So these are the kind of projects that we do. This one was coordinated by the Two Rivers Ottauquechee Regional Commission. And we took those out. We found the money, hired contractors to remove those big abutments. So now when the river is high and there's a lot of water coming through, it can just gradually go up the bank and spread out as it should. And it'll do that along the entire reach of the river so that it doesn't blow things out. Come on, there we go. So it doesn't blow out the banks above and flood. So these are the kind of projects that we look to do. Riparian buffer plantings, getting more vegetation is great for bank stability, all those roots locking the soil together. It shades the stream so the temperatures for trout stay lower. The stream bank restoration projects, we look at road and bridge and culverts, the culverts and bridges that are too small, that are constricting flows. And when a town knows that they go to a particular culvert every time there's a big storm because it floods and washes out and causes problems, those are the ones we want to be looking at. We work with agriculture and forestry and stormwater management. We're looking for what we can do, any of these types of projects that will improve both the water quality and the habitat conditions. And there's lots to do. So what I'm looking for is what you see out on the landscape that the agency should be addressing. You know, we put these lists together of implementation projects that are potential projects. We try to find them and identify them, you know, where these projects should be applied, what they're going to address. This happens to be a land erosion problem. This one's, you know, nutrients and bacteria that's getting into the water from something. And then who do we work with to address those particular projects? There's lots of partners out there. We work with federal partners and other state agencies. We work with regional organizations like the planning commissions and the Natural Resource Conservation District, watershed groups, municipal bodies, conservation commissions and planning commissions, and definitely private landowners. You know, these projects are all on somebody's land, and we need that cooperation. We identify these projects in all these land use. We call these the 5 land use sectors that we deal with. So there's agricultural issues all over the landscape, stormwater from developed lands, and then stormwater, basically road runoff issues, which are prevalent, especially where there's a lot of dirt roads. We deal with wastewater issues, whether that's municipal wastewater or private septic systems. And then the natural resource restoration area, the rivers, lakes, streams, ponds, wetlands that we can be working with, and forest lands. So we're looking to identify projects, find the partners who are willing to take charge of those projects and implement them and basically act as project managers. And we need the cooperating landowners. These are all voluntary projects. So unless someone is willing to let these projects get done, we can't just go out and do them. My job is focused a lot on finding the money to make them happen. And so we want to match the right project with the right funding pot, get somebody out there to survey it and scope it and design it, and then make sure we actually get it on the ground and make those improvements, which ultimately down the road are what's going to improve the water quality and the habitat conditions. These are the projects. So we have what's called the Watershed Projects Database, which is loaded with lots and lots of projects. Again, this is something you can look at online. It's all available for the public. And all you have to do is search for the Vermont Watershed Projects Database, and you'll get a screen where you can enter which basin you want to find out about, or you can just put in your town and see what's proposed for your town, and hit the search button, and all these projects will come up. And for Basin 10, there are 572 in the database already. We have completed, since the database started, 50, and the database hasn't been going for that long. So I'm actually, this is a good number. Which means there are still 522 to go. I'm feeling pretty job secure right now. So there are lots of projects in here on all these different kinds of projects that we can be putting in. All the ones that have this grant number, and these are all completed projects that we've undertaken with our partners and made sure they happened. We found the funding, the clean water funding that the state has. Some are federal funding, some are through private funders with our cooperating organizations, which is fantastic. So there's a lot to do and a lot out there that we can be working on. But as I said, only if we have cooperating landowners. The state can't come in to any property or any place and say, we're going to do this project. That's not how it works. We need cooperating landowners and people willing to work with us to do this. And if you're interested, you can find out where all these projects are. This is the Clean Water Project Explorer. Again, all you have to do is Google that, and this will come up. And you can, again, put in your town or the watershed that you're looking at. And each one of these buttons is a project that has already been identified, one of the 572. And it's color coded, where the orange is usually like a stormwater project or a road project. And the green ones are natural resource projects, the river restoration and the lakeshore projects. So all of these, and if you click on a button, it will tell you exactly what that project is. And this happens to be in Coolidge State Forest. So I'll be working with the Department of Forest, Parks and Recreation on these and trying to improve the conditions. You know, this is probably an old logging bridge that's too small and causing erosion as water tries to make its way below it. So these are the kinds of projects, and each one of these you can click on and find out Most of these projects have come from some form of assessment work where someone's gone out and looked at, in the case of most of the green ones, they're done through what we call as a river geomorphic assessment. Someone has walked from the top to the bottom of the Ottauquechee on the majority of the Black, Millbrook, and looked at where there's erosion, what's causing that erosion, what stormwater discharges are coming in, all of those issues. So we have stream geomorphic assessments. We also have stormwater assessments that have been done. You can see clusters of the orange ones in Ludlow and Springfield. We've done stormwater master plans with those towns. We're going through that process in Windsor as well. And we'll be doing it in Woodstock, which is great. So we'll be getting more and more dots as those assessments go forward. So there's plenty to be done. And you, as I said, you can just Google this and zoom in and find out maybe one of these is on your property, and you'll be willing to work with us to see those implemented. So my schedule for creating this plan is I'm doing this kind of developing the kickoff. You're an early meeting for me. I'm planning more of them in the winter months, December, January, February. I'll be doing that. So hopefully I'll be developing all the strategies over the winter, and I'm seeking suggestions. What you want to see happen out there. Where do you see water quality issues? I certainly can't be everywhere. I don't have my eyes on every stream, and we don't have the capacity to visit all of them. So your eyes and ears definitely help me locate where we need to focus on, and be able to understand what kinds of projects are out there that we could be doing. So hopefully I'll be able to have that draft plan by the spring for review, and coming back to you in later summer to get final comments and make adjustments on where I got it right, where I missed, and finalize that plan by the end of next year. So it's a long process, but hopefully it's enough time to really get good public input on what we're coming up with. Make sure we get the right things in here, and the right places that we need to focus those protection efforts on as well. So that's, you can contact me. It's just marie.caduto@vermont.gov, easiest way. And certainly both Ginevra and Michael know how to reach me without too much trouble. So, and if you're interested, even just search on Vermont Watershed Planning Program, and you'll come up with the Basin 10 information with a couple of clicks. It's a long website, so just Googling Vermont Watershed Planning will do it for you. And I am very interested in hearing from you and knowing what you would like to see happening and being included in this plan. So I'm going to stop sharing, but let you know that for some reason I can't see anybody's face. I can only see my own, which is a very odd way to do Zoom. So I'm going to let Ginevra and Michael feed me those questions, and I'm sorry I can't react to you face to face. It's kind of odd. So thank you for listening. I much appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you for kind of giving a presentation to yourself, in essence. That must have felt weird.
A little different.
Yeah, no, that was excellent. Thank you so much. I see Michael's on, but he's muted. So I just wanted to go ahead and share a comment off Facebook that we got from Craig's, who wrote, "I love that this is happening. I'd love to volunteer to improve water quality. We need more wood in the river and streams to improve trout habitat." So not as much of a question, but you're welcome to respond to it.
Absolutely. That is something that anyone who is an angler understands. And many who aren't anglers look at down trees and roots and sticks all over the streams and rivers and think that should get cleaned up. And that wood, which we call large wood, and we do physically do large wood addition projects. If you fish, you know that's where you're going to cast your bait, right? It's going to be near those snags. It's going to be near the big rock pile, because those provide cover and habitat for trout and all the other fish. So one of the unfortunate things that happened after Tropical Storm Irene, when all the big machines got in there, is they pulled all that wood out. And so our rivers kind of were stripped of all that large wood habitat. And then that's the only good thing about all the erosion from Irene, is that now 10 years later, the trees on the bank that have been eroded are all falling back in, and that's ultimately a good thing. But yeah, the large wood and those fisheries habitat. When you create fisheries habitat, you create habitat for everything else as well. So those are really key projects to be doing, and I'm glad to add that in as project work. I'm going to write that down. Thank you.
So we have another question here. Does the water testing from conservation commissions, for instance, Heartland Test along several sites at Lulls Brook, go to you automatically, or should we arrange to get the data to you?
I've received the Heartland data several times, but I haven't received it probably in the last couple of years. So I would love to receive that data. And I do incorporate that when I'm doing the assessment. When I take our data, I basically put it together with the volunteer data. So having that data would be great if you could send that to me. We have a couple of volunteer groups in this basin, which is really great. So we have the Black River Action Team monitors the Black River, and these are all volunteer programs. The Ottauquechee Natural Resources Conservation District, and I think Sue Greenall is on this call, coordinates the volunteer monitoring work on Kedron Brook. And then Ottauquechee River Group, which wasn't able to do it this past summer, but they have been doing the Ottauquechee River for a number of years. So we really value and make good use of the volunteer monitoring data.
Thank you. And I want to make sure we get the first, that was kind of a two-parter question. So I wanted to make sure we get the first part as well, which is, what is the most useful packet of information to provide if we know of a potential problem area? Photos, descriptions, site visit?
Yeah, I'm glad to do site visits, but if you can provide a photograph and a location, even if your phone has that, most of the phones with your locator on will give a GPS location. Those pieces, and of course how to contact you so I can get more information, is really valuable, because that's where I start whenever I'm doing kind of an initial evaluation of a potential project. I start with a desktop, an aerial photograph, and looking at the streams and what's going on, what are the land uses around it, so I can kind of preliminarily understand why there might be a water quality or a habitat issue here. So those pieces are the kind of key pieces of information: the contact, the location, and a photograph or a description of what the issue is. That would be great.
So we have another question here. The town of Killington is moving forward on plans to build a municipal water system to serve residences and businesses up Route 4 from the mountain times to and including Killington Road. Some say the water will come from existing wells. Others say it will be pulled from the Ottauquechee. Either source would further stress the water levels and habitat along the river, which is already scheduled to be affected by moving water through the Killington Pico Resort to be released into the Champlain Water Basin. Is your agency aware of this, and do you have any thoughts about it?
If they're developing a water system, yes, the agency is absolutely aware of it. It's probably being funded through state funding called the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund. And certainly they will need a myriad set of permits for developing that water system. So it's not my area, but I will make note to look into that and see what the connections are. I can probably ultimately find out what how much they're planning to withdraw. And I think my understanding of I haven't dove into it yet, obviously. But my understanding is that they're still in the kind of the design phase. So that's why it's still questionable where the source is going to be from. But I can make sure I include some information on that project in the plan.
Kind of an addendum to that question came in saying Killington is planning on using TIF funding.
Oh, okay. I know the acronym and I'm
Like
spacing out on it.
tax increment funding, right? Or something like that. I could be wrong.
I'm spacing out on what TIF is, but that makes
tax
but I know it makes sense.
But
Too many acronyms in this world.
I think we might have missed an earlier question. Actually, I think that you wrote, Michael, which I wanted to pose as well. Who can partner with the state on watershed projects? Where does one start in the process for proposing a project to the state?
So you can propose a project directly to me, or you can do it with any of our partners. We have a number of partners that we pay to work with us. Again, those are the regional planning commissions. In the case of this basin, that's Two Rivers Ottauquechee Regional Commission and the Mount Scottney Regional Commission. So both of those have staff that we work with. The Ottauquechee Natural Resources Conservation District kind of covers the whole, most of the basin. And they're a partner as well. So Sustainable Woodstock is a partner. We're working with Sustainable Woodstock on a number of projects in Woodstock. The Connecticut River Conservancy is on this call as well and is one of our partners. The Black River Action Team on the Black River, again, the Ottauquechee River Group, the Connecticut River Joint Commissions. So all of the, kind of any of the organizations that have anything to do with water, we work with, and we welcome new partners. We work, again, the Ludlow, but the Heartland Conservation Commission, the Woodstock Conservation Commission, any of those organizations, we work with planning commissions. So if you're working with any of those bodies, municipal bodies, or nonprofit organizations, most of them know how to get a hold of me, and certainly I welcome direct communication with anyone who has ideas.
The next question down here is, how does ANR work interface with preservation of rare and endangered species and control of invasive species? You did mention invasive species.
Yeah.
You went a little.
In the plan, I'll have a section on rare, threatened, and endangered aquatic, mostly aquatic or riparian species. We don't really, for both RTEs and invasives, we don't go in these plans beyond kind of the riparian area, because that's our focus. There are other parts of ANR that work with the terrestrial species. Excuse me, but certainly one of the concerns in this basin are freshwater mussels. There are a number of of endangered and threatened, both federally and state endangered and threatened mussel species in the Connecticut River. and in the lower portions of both the Ottauquechee and the Black. And those certainly I'll be highlighting in the plan. We work with the Department of Fish and Wildlife and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, trying to address those, providing, if there are projects we can do in association with Fish and Wildlife, I'll work those into the plan, and certainly making sure that the projects that are being implemented are beneficial to, and obviously not damaging to, because when you do an implementation project, it is not unusual for there to be a sediment release, or because you're disturbing something so that long term you can fix it. And whenever we do that, we're very cognizant of making sure we know what's in the area, what species are there, and that we're not going to, impact those trying to improve something else. So I will be addressing RTEs in the plan. If there's something of specific consideration or concern, please let me know.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Marie. We don't have another written question, but I wanted to pose this, so I guess I'll just do it to you directly. There's been a lot of talk recently about data coming out showing increased rainfall and a wetter climate going forward in Vermont due to climate change. I was just curious if this is like how climate change is being factored into any of our plans statewide, and how you kind of are thinking about it.
Absolutely thinking about it. The state has a new climate action plan, and as we move these basin plans forward, we're incorporating that, and those goals and actions into the basin plans as well. Excuse me. So there's a section in each basin plan now, or the coming plans, I should say. I just did the first one in the basin south of this, kind of summarizing what we know of the impacts in a particular basin. Certainly a generalized what is happening in Vermont with climate change and how that's impacting our surface waters. That's the connection we focus on, is what are these changes meaning to our rivers and streams, and the absolute increase in volume of precipitation and intensity of precipitation events. So the Northeast basically is getting, I hope I'm getting my number right here, 30% more precipitation in intense storms than we were like 20 years ago. So instead of getting, a half inch of rain a week, we're getting 2-3 inches in a day, and how the land can handle that and how our rivers and streams can handle that is the water quality connection, right? So as in any big storm, you see the waters turn brown. It's carrying a lot more sediment and pollutants off the land in those really intense storms. It's carrying that volume much faster. So it's a velocity and a volume, and we call it stream power, that incredible power that excess water has to do damage to the stream banks, to the infrastructure, to the habitat that it's mangling on its way down. So those are having serious water quality impacts, habitat impacts. So we are starting to cover those in the plan, and there's going to be a section on climate change and the connection to the surface waters in this basin. So I will be drafting that hopefully soon.
Great, thank you. Well, Michael, did you see any questions that we had missed?
I don't think so. Let me see.
And any folks who haven't asked what's in their head, now's the time. I'm just double checking here too.
Did we ask the question about what is the most useful packet of information to provide?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. In terms of site visit photographs.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
on Facebook, I was asked, where can I find this presentation and slide deck for viewing later? So I'm going to send out a recording of this. And if you're game, Marie, I'd be happy to send out the presentation, the PowerPoint as well.
Absolutely. I'll
Yeah.
turn it into a PDF and get it to you.
Yeah, that'd be great. So I can send that out to everyone who's registered. And on Facebook, if you're watching and I commented this part, just email me at programs@sustainablewoodstock.org, and I can send it. But it'll go out to everyone who's on Zoom tonight who's registered. And I'm happy to include the links you kind of mentioned, Marie, as well. I don't know if you want to, you don't have to spend all your time finding all the resources you mentioned, but, you know, people to view online, impaired waters and such.
Yeah, basically, if you go, to the Agency of Natural Resources webpage and just look for Watershed Planning Program, or Google ANR Watershed Planning Program, you'll come up to our section, which will, kind of introduce you. We've got some story maps on what a basin plan is, kind of what we do. I'm developing a story map. I haven't gotten finished yet for the Basin 10, this introductory process. And it has all the old basin plans in it, so you can see what these look like and what's in them, and all my contact information is there. Phone number, email. Email is certainly the easiest because we're obviously still working at home. So hopefully you can reach me through that easily enough. And as I said, I really appreciate you just listening tonight and understanding what's going on. I'm hoping you'll stay involved in the process. If you want to shoot me or Ginevra an email and say, please keep me in touch, I'm glad to add you to kind of a contacts list so you'll know when meetings are coming up and when I put out a draft for review. And again, to send me any information and contacts and suggestions you have. Most people don't want to share their favorite fishing hole, but those things are important because those are the areas we want to protect and make sure those uses are there long-term into the future. So I welcome your interest, and I appreciate your time tonight in listening to what's going on. Thank you.
I do happen to know that Marie is particularly interested in undersized culverts. Whatever we're doing when we're driving around doubles as a culvert assessment. If you happen to see it.
Exciting stuff. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it can become somewhat of an obsession after a while.
You're getting thank yous in the chat, Marie, as well. Thank you, Marie. Very interesting from Amy and Judy Howland. Hi, Judy. Says, thank you, Marie. Always good to hear what you have to say. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us and for lending your time and working on this whole process. It's really great.
Thanks for
everybody for listening in.
Come to Jennyville Road in Heartland for undersized culverts.
There you go.
There you go. So it begins. You shouldn't have asked. Okay. Well, thank you so much. And I'll follow up by email with folks.
Sounds good. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night.